Okay guys, so today I have for you a White Forest Bystial deck profile. I've noticed that sometimes when I make videos that aren't explicitly about White Forest, it gets like a quarter of the views, and I know that my channel is largely focused on White Forest, but I just thought that was funny. So anyhow, guys, here is a new take from my channel on Bystial White Forest. I want to go over my choices, some of the limitations with the engine. I will show you some sample replays, both combo lines and actual gameplay replays, to show you what the game plan is supposed to look like and how it often gets messy and you don't execute the way that you want. I ended up dropping out of Omega tier on YGO Omega into Master testing this deck, and my main takeaway from that experience is that this has a different matchup spread than both the Runic version and I think most of the other versions of this deck, and that is because if your Bystials are not good, you effectively have a much smaller non-engine count because these don't really do anything. And the problem with that is you don't have enough space to just run hand traps. But even if you do count these as hand traps in matchups where these basically are hand traps, if you just fill these slots with stuff like Ash Blossom, Effect, Veiler, Ogre, whatever, Mourner, whatever you want, then you're not going to have enough spells and traps in the deck. Almost to the point where I was considering maybe I should go back to playing Reinforcement to the army so that I see the toy cards more often and I have more access to spells and traps. But this is the version that I have been testing most lately. So if you have any feedback in the comments, let me know. I am opting to play a Black Goat Laughs here because since I'm playing Thrust to have a higher spell and trap count, I didn't want, if I have to set a card, because like normally if they have a monster, you're going to search for the talents, but if they don't have a card and I have to set the woes or the tails, I usually want one other option for something else, and this has been by far one of the most flexible cards either side of the dice roll in this deck. The only reason that I'm not playing 3 of this is because it feels so much worse when you're not on the Runic stuff, because if you're playing Runic, even if you go second, as early as the draw phase, you can discard this card from your hand off of the Hugin, and then it's still like a pseudo breaker. So this card is super solid and very flexible in this deck, but it feels a little bit less flexible if you're not playing the Runic cards. So yeah, anyhow, here's a relatively large toy count because again, I'm kind of lower than I might be in some situations on spell and trap count. The most important cards in this deck are Lubellion and Saronir, and the whole point is to get you to regain. So in the extra deck, there is a little bit of space. I normally don't like the Zolkin package, but I am opting to play it because this is a Dark Dragon that is treated as level 12, which means that you can tribute it off of the Lubellion, and that's good. So yeah, there's enough space that it's worth playing. Now, you have to play Dispatter in this deck because this deck uses Dispatter. The standard end board is Diabel and a way to Dispatter or Dispatter on field with Regained, and then usually Woes or something else. There are other very useful cards like Etude. The only problem with this, aside from it not being good in the main because it's like committing to going first, is that it would kind of change what I would have in my extra deck. I would probably want a second Chaos Angel or just more level 10s in general so that I could actually resolve the Etude more often. Because this card just says that you need to include a dragon monster in what you're using to synchro summon, but it doesn't force you to synchro summon a dragon monster. So you actually can make cards like Legatia out of turn, just as long as you're also using a Bystial. So it could be like a Lubellion and then a Sylvia or a Rusia, and you go into Legatia, or it could be, you know, just one of the regular Bystials, and then you go into a Chaos Angel or a Satellite Warrior or, you know, whatever. So yeah, Branded Beast I also considered. The problem with this card is, aside from it being a going first card, so obviously you can cite it in if you know you're going first, is it's often just better to get the Regained immediately so you can get the draw off of the Regained, instead of setting the Regained in the end phase. However, I would say that one way to partially help with the issue of spell and trap count being low is you could consider 3 Prosperities in here. And that means that you can't get the regain draw in your turn, but then it's better if you're doing the setup for you're dumping the regained off of, for example, a Saronir, and the Lubellion is placing the beast so that it can place the regained face up in the end phase. But if you're not playing Prosperity, the chance of that happening really is like you have to draw the Lubellion and the Saronir, and that is just off the top of my head something like a 10% chance, so I'm obviously not building the deck to do that. However, if I was playing Prosperity, I would probably consider, you know, a more Branded Beast heavy strategy. Okay, now let me show you some of the sample combo lines. and then I will show you the replays after that. So what happens if you draw Saronir? Okay, so here is a, just a hand. We have Sylvie, we have Toy Box, and then we have drawn the 1 Woes and the 1 Tails. So normal summon Sylvie, normally you would search for the Woes or the Tails unless you're trying to play around Droll. I have a separate video on that, so I'm not going into that now. Obviously, we've drawn both targets, so there's no search, but I'm just showing you how you would do the line. Here you can activate the box. We activate the Tails because it's now live. We search for the LZ. The LZ sends the Soldier. We search for the Esteller. Always remember that Tank, not only is it basically like a level modulator for synchro summoning or a tuner modulator because you can replace it for a tuner in your hand or grave, but it also allows you to get Esteller into rotation if you've already used your normal summon. So here the Soldier searches us Arusia. We special the Arusia. I'm not going to talk about playing around Nib right now. I have endless videos talking about playing around Nib. I just want to show you what the deck is supposed to do. You can do this while playing around Nib too. So the Arciela searches the Veiler. This is what we want to be part of our standard line. What is very important that you should remember with the standard game plan here is you do not want to be in a position where you're using the Bystial to banish your only tuner. The tuner in your grave is the card that allows you to make Dispatter. Now here we happen to have both the Sylvie and the Rusia, so it doesn't matter as much. But anyhow, so I banish the LZ to summon the Saronir, and then the Saronir and the Rusia go into the Dispatter. The Saronir dumps the Lubellion, and now here you have to make a choice. So this kind of depends on the type of board that you're going for and when you want to continue playing or stop playing, because you have a couple options here. The Toy Tank can bring out the Esteller from your hand, and the Esteller and the Arciela can go into the Diabel, and then you have the Esteller in rotation, for example. The thing is that you want to have the Lubellion in rotation as early as possible so that you have regained and you get the draw off of it. You just have to keep in mind that if you don't have a banished card, the Dispatter isn't going to do anything. It's basically just going to be a vanilla on field. So whether or not you choose to use this now or go a different route will often depend on whether or not you have access to a different Bystial, and you'll see that. Anyhow, so I bring out the Lubellion and I place the regained face up. Here now I go into the Diabel. The Diabel gets me back a card, and now I turn the 2 level 4s into the Gallant Granite. So right now, what you're seeing here is the classic standard way that I think this deck should play. So you have searched both the Nib and the Veiler, and then, because you have made Gallant Granite, you can make not only a Little Knight, but it's a Little Knight made off an extra deck monster that gets to banish a card. So because we banish a light or a dark, we can target one of those monsters, place it on the bottom of the deck, and draw a card. So wait, let's go back to check field. So this is the standard end board where you have a Diabel, you have a Little Knight, which has given you the draw because you made it specifically with the Gallant Granite and the Lubellion. So these cards aren't doing anything after they've been used, so that's fine. And you have a bunch of cards in your hand. So the Nib Veiler alone is super, super strong. You have access to Woes here. You've added back the Tails, so you don't have to you're not forced to send your box or your Woes without using it off of Diabel. You have a solid send off of that. And you have some set up in your grave where here is the LZ. The Woes in this case will probably give you the Esteller because the Esteller isn't in rotation, and you have both the Rusia and the Sylvie here. So you already have the option to bring out one of them by shuffling back the Arciela, and then if you've used the Diabel is also something that you can use to bring out the other one. So even though the actual monster field looks small, like it's just a Little Knight and the Diabel, this is actually a huge amount of interactions, but most importantly, the interactions are spread across different locations. So Nib Veiler in the hand, you have the Woes here in the grave, and you're cycling through Regained. Remember that not having access to another Bystial or another way to banish is not ideal. Obviously, you want in your opponent's turn that you can trigger this again because of the Little Knight. You don't want to put back your own Little Knight. So if you don't banish an opponent's light or dark monster, you don't really want to trigger the Little Knight, the Regain to put back your own Little Knight, unless for some reason you want to make the Little Knight again on your own turn, which is an actual possibility. Like, that is a solid strategy, especially if you're only playing one Little Knight. So just keep that in mind. Also, You need to remember that the other effect of this card is once per turn, if your opponent normal or special summons a monster, except during the damage step, you can target a Bystial monster in your grave and special summon it. So that will be the Bystial Dispatter, but you need to have a banish card, either your banish card or their banish card, for this to be relevant. You don't want to just bring out your Dispatter when you haven't even used like a Little Knight, and then they, you know, I don't know, like Talents or Dark Ruler or whatever before you even had a chance to use that card. Okay. So what happens if you draw Lubellion? It is very similar. So here we've drawn Lubellion instead of Saronir, and then we've drawn access to the White Forest engine. So here is the box. We set the tank and the soldier. We Lubellion for Magnamut. I would say that the main difference between drawing these two is that you can get Magnamut, and that is good because it guarantees a Bystial in your hand. So all of the pressure of having a banish card for Dispatter is not on just the Little Knight. So, normal summon the Sylvie, search for the woes, special the Russia, send the soldier, soldier searches for another box. We box to pop the tank comes out, we tank to put the Esteller into rotation. This gives us the Arciela. We send the woes here and set the woes, and that triggers the Esteller, so now we go into the Diabel. Here we are going to activate the Magnamut and banish the tank. In this case, we are going to be putting the tank back, otherwise we would never ever ever put our single tank out of rotation. But that is just something worth keeping in mind, that maybe you should choose a different target so that you still have access to this off of box. In this case, we are bringing back the tank because we still want the 2 level 4s for the Gallant Granite. But just remember, if for some reason you want to make sure that you have a banished monster here and you're sticking the Dispatter on board, or like your Lubellion is Bystialed or something, then you should maybe not do that. So now we tribute the Dispatter for the Lubellion to bring out the Regained. Just remember, the Regained will get us access to the Dispatter on their turn. We make the Gallant Granite, we search for the Nib, and here we go for the SP, banishing a card, which is the Magnamut, and that is a card that we also want to keep in rotation, so we put the Magnamut back, we draw a card off the Regained, and so here you see basically the same thing, except we haven't, I ended in main phase 1, but if we go to end phase, we will resolve the Magnamut effect, and then we'll search probably a Druis Worm. It'll usually be a Druis Worm, or if for some reason you want a Baldrake instead of the Druis Worm. It also may depend on if you are playing the Etude or you're siding into the Etude, and you want to be able to trigger the Druis Worm off of using a Synchro Material for the Etude. So I think that this is better, like in air quotes, in terms of the final end board, because drawing Lubellion means you have guaranteed access to Magnamut, which means in the end phase you have a guaranteed other Bystial. Whereas if you start with Saronir, if you haven't drawn into another Bystial, you may be forced to do a slightly more awkward play where you keep the Dispatter on field or something and you don't actually get into Regained. So that's just worth noting. Lubellion is technically the better card to draw if you're going first. Then if you're going second, obviously Saronir is potentially an interruption and Lubellion isn't. So again, Nib Veiler here, we have Woset here, Regained to cycle through the Dispatter and also to give us a draw off of the Little Knight. Little Knight also will give fodder for the Dispatter so that it has a negate, and then we have Diabel. Okay, so I also just wanted to show, like, those are the standard lines. That's what the deck is supposed to do every single time you play, and that basically relies on you drawing either the Lubellion or the Saronir, so that is the majority of games that you will play. Statistically, you will see one of those 2 cards. But what happens if you are also playing Etude? So here we normal summon the Sylvie, we search for the Tails, we activate Box, set the tank and the soldier. Tails gives us the LZ because we've already used our normal. We send the soldier to search for the Esteller. The soldier brings itself out and it gives us the Russia because we already control the box. Now the Russia comes out, we go into the Arciela. In this case, I am opting to search for the woes off of the Arciela instead of the Veiler. Because I value the woes over the Veiler. Obviously, it depends on the matchup. Like if you're playing against a heavy fusion deck, then usually just going into Silvera on their turn is not very good, and you would only consider choosing woes over Veiler if you had like already drawn a Veiler and you wanted to Arciela on their turn and search another Veiler or something, but that's also kind of risky. So anyhow, the tank gives us the Esteller in rotation, and that gives us the Diabel. So now we will activate the Saronir and we'll banish the LZ. So here in our grave, you see that we still have the Esteller in rotation, and we have our Tuner so that we can go into a Dispatter play. So the Rusia and the Saronir go into the Bystial Dispatter, and the Saronir dumps the Lubellion. Here we are choosing to bring our only banished card out because we are thinking that at some point, like, we're going to be able to put another banished card there and continue getting stuff in rotation. So here the Lubellion now places the Etude. So instead of the Regained, we're placing the Etude. So just to go over this quickly, during either player's turn, you can, immediately after this effect resolves, synchro summon one synchro monster using monsters you control as material, including a dragon monster. And this is once per turn. While you control a Bystial monster, this is also very important, banish any monsters that would be sent to your opponent's graveyard as tributes for their ritual or as material for fusion, synchro, or link summon. Against certain decks, this is kind of a floodgate, so that's relevant to keep in mind. But really, we're using this for the out-of-turn synchro. Now we bring back our Sylvie by shuffling the Arciela in, and we can make the Gallant Granite, so we search for the Nib. So we don't have the Veiler to complement the Nib in hand, but still, we have the Nib. And now we set this card. So, one of the things that you can do if you don't have access to, like, like a Rusia or a Sylvie in rotation, is you can just turn the Lubellion and the LZ into a Chaos Angel, because they don't have to be tuners for the Chaos Angel, it just has to be light or dark. And you can trigger the Chaos Angel that way. You also obviously can turn the Lubellion and one of the tuners into a Legatia, so that can be better in certain scenarios, especially if you, like, really need a draw. Maybe you're hoping to draw into another Bystial or something like that. So yeah, you have more options there for what you go into. And then you haven't even used the Diabel, so you could make, like, a Zapper Shrimp that go into... You can still go into the Legatia this way. I'm just showing, like, there are other options you have. And you can make quite a lot of, plays out of turn this way. So that is it for the sample combos. Let's check what I'm doing for time. 60 minutes. Okay. So for some reason, guys, I promise you, there is a virtual world player in Omega, or maybe going between Omega and Master Tier in this game somehow. Okay. And for some reason, I'm playing against him all the time. So he goes first, he activates Desires. His hand was garbage. That's classic virtual world, losing to yourself. So I don't know what he's playing. I normal summon the Sylvie. I've drawn access to a Druis Worm and a Regained. So I don't have the combo cards, but I do have some of the pieces. He activates the Droll here, and that is not good for me, but I see that he has bricked so far. So I just placed the Regained because I'm hoping to be able to use the Druis Worm on his turn. This deck doesn't really have many lights and darks, so I'm thinking, if surely he has a way to play, he'll get rid of the Sylvie, I'll be able to summon the Druis Worm, and at least get a draw off of the Sylvie being banished. So anyhow, he starts going through the standard plays, and he goes for the Charge Warrior here, he gets a draw, he goes for the Zolkin, he summons the Crystal Wing here. I do have an Imperm set, and I know that I need the Druis Worm to resolve for me to have a chance of playing. So when he goes to pop the unknown back row, I chain the Imperm onto the Crystal Wing. And I believe he chains the Chuche to pop my Sylvie or something like that. So he attacks, I special summon out the Druis Worm. He destroys the Druis Worm, so I Druis Worm send the Crystal Wing, because obviously I don't want to have to play through that on my turn. He makes the Lars, so now my Druis Worm comes back because he has summoned a monster, so I'm able to activate the Regained. So I send the Soldier off of the LZ. That's not something that he can really respond to with the Evolves Our Lars. And here the Soldier comes out. I'm seeing if there's any way of me baiting the Lars. So I bring out a Chaos Angel targeting the Chuche, because I can't target this card while it has material. Otherwise I would have targeted that instead. But I at least force out the Chuche, and then he surrenders there. So this was not a very good hand for me. But that happens if you don't draw, especially like the Saronir or the Lubellion. Okay, so then here's the second game. So here I also draw kind of an awkward hand. One of the things about this deck, not that you really need to know this, but if they resolve Kowloon, it's a lot easier for them to start playing. And because the deck is very bricky, I take the chance and I ash the Kowloon, because that means he may not have a way to play and he may just have bricked again. But he does have an extender in putting the Nyan Nyan on the field. So Charge Warrior again. I'm thinking that, if his hand is bad, I'm just going to use the Veiler. Most of these cards you can't Veiler because they activate and resolve basically in the hand. So like you can't Veiler the Lulu or whatever. So I'm not sure what the best target is for the Veiler. Maybe I should have waited for, wait, no, isn't there a thing where you can't target this? So while you control another synchro monster, yeah. So I figured that if he already had the Charge Warrior on field, by the time he made the Zolkin, I wouldn't be able to Veiler it. So yeah. Now here he draws a Totem Bird, so this is a Spell or Trap negate. And I only have one play, which is the Elzette, so I just have the Dark Ruler here. And I Elzette, I send the Imperm. Now this is probably a mistake, because I should have probably kept the Imperm. Since I Dark Rulered, he's not going to make Thrusts live anyhow. So this was the dead card, and the Imperm was at least, like, you know, something I could keep. But I figured I probably would be discarding both cards anyhow. So he uses Droplet, and I'm like, okay, so he Droplets a useless card. So he hasn't really lost anything, but at least I can still make a Synchro play, and then I give up my last Spell or Trap. I've already used my normal summon on the Sylvie, so I can't just go for like an Stellar or something, and so I opt to go for the Rusia, because I'm thinking that I'm just going to destroy the Totem Bird by battle, and then I'll go into a Little Knight, which can banish the Crystal Wing, and he will be on top deck against a banish. So yeah. That's like kind of a scrappy game, but honestly, like, a lot of your weird hands look kind of weird. Okay, now I have a game against Heroes. So he ashes the a Stellar. This is one of those things that doesn't hurt nearly as much if you have sent a Soldier, because you can still follow up. So I special the Rusia. We draw into the Regained here. So I'm like, okay, if he hasn't interrupted me after the Ash so far, I suspect that he doesn't have any more hand traps. So I think I'm going to be able to reset the Regained later. Or sorry, get the Regained back to my hand off of the Diabell before he, you know, stops me from doing that. So I place the Regained, and I banish the Stellar. Remember that if you only have one tuner in rotation, so there's no Sylvie here, there's just the Rusia, you never want to get rid of this, because that is the tuner that you use to go into Dispatter, and you see there are no other tuners on field here. So I Regained, I put the card back in, the tank basically tuner modulates to change itself out for the Rusia, and that allows us to go into this Dispatter here. The Saronir dumps the Lubellion, the Thrust sets the Goat, so I already had access to Woes, and this is what I was talking about. You usually want a Thrust target that is not Woes or Tails, that is good either on field or in grave. And then this is game one, so I guess he doesn't want me to know what he's playing, and so he scoops, even though I don't actually have a banished card. So yeah, that was game one. Now we have game two here. So I draw Saronir, and then like kind of my Stellar, and now I obviously know that he's on Heroes, so he activates Shadow Mist, and I actually don't know the hero matchup super well, so I just Veiler the first card, and I also Saronir the Malicious, because I'm like, if I wait for the Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer, or Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, or whatever, maybe I will have already lost, so maybe I should just get rid of the Malicious, which is a guaranteed body. But I don't actually know how I should have used these interruptions, to be honest. So this like favorite contact, or whatever that card is called, that trap card, yeah, the favorite contact card seems like pretty strong. He goes for the Miracle Fusion here. I'm just waiting for my turn, and here's the Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. The Denier comes out, and he sets 3. So now I have Lubellion, and I'm like, okay, is there a way that I can bait him into putting this in the grave so that I can banish it and maybe have a chance at winning? So I search the Magnamut, I bring out the Bystial Lubellion, and obviously he's not stupid, so he doesn't pop his own Phoenix Enforcer, he pops something else, so I can't Bystial it. So I was like, okay, well, I'll at least Thrust, but then he Judgments the Thrust, which is like, you know, maybe I was going to try to Talents take the Phoenix Enforcer, summon the Magnamut, make Little Knight, you know, get rid of his own Enforcer with the Bystial, and Little Knight something else or a back row. But yeah, he Judgments the Thrust, which would have given me the Talents, and then he Judgments the Stellar. So I'm like, okay, all I have left is a Magnamut, and there's not really anything that great to banish besides the Malicious. So I set the Goat, and I have Druid Worm, and I'm like, wait, there's nothing I can do here. So then we go into the last game against Hero. So here I draw a very weird hand. I don't have any spells or traps hard drawn, which means that the Sylvie has to resolve for me to be able to play. So I use the Lubellion first because I am hoping that if he has Ash, he uses it on Lubellion because he's noticed that I'm on a high Bystial count. So he probably thinks that that's important for how my deck works, which is true. But I already drew the Saronir as well. So we special the Rusia and we send this card to get a draw. I'm really hoping just to try to get other stuff in my hand that's not just like doubles of stuff, like, you know, double Sylvie. So here I make the Gallant Granite. So here I'm starting to think like, okay, I used my normal summon. I actually don't think that I can make a good play here. And from what I recall, Nib is typically pretty good against heroes. So I feel like, do I just sit on Nib? So anyhow, I Lubellion and I bring out the Regained here. And I Little Knight, because I'm still thinking maybe I can get like a draw that might fix my hand in some way. But that, you know, really this is not like a good end board. So he Feather Dusters, which is unfortunate because I really wanted the Regain to stick here, but and then I would get something maybe off of the Little Knight. So I chain Little Knight to his Stratos, and he chains Eclipse, but it doesn't work that way. Yeah, anyhow, so, but it still resolves, you know, like, it's not negated. He uses the Faris, he puts that in the grave, he has the Vision Hero increase here, and he searches the Poly, I think, off of it. Wait, does this not? Oh no, that's a different effect. Here he searches the Poly, and he goes into the Cross Hero Crusader. Now, because I don't know this deck super well, I'm like, I don't exactly know when I am supposed to nib, but I read this card, and I see that this is not a quick effect. You contribute this card, special summon a level 7 or lower hero monster from your deck or extra deck that cannot be normal summoned or set, ignoring its summoning conditions. So I'm thinking, is that like broken card that like looks kind of like this, but it has wings or something? I don't remember what it's called. So I'm thinking I should probably nib him on resolution here because I don't remember what that card does. And then I guess he realizes that he doesn't have much of a play here. And I just want to draw a Spell or Trap. This is one of the problems I was telling you with this version of the deck. The Spell and Trap count is a little bit low. And so I activate the Sylvie, it resolves, so I get my woes, so I don't have to give up my skill drain. And I search the Rusia, the woe sets itself back, I special the Rusia, and I guess he doesn't have anything, so he quits. So if we just take one more look over this deck here, I would say that I think that this is missing something like Prosperity, but because the standard game plan is really reliant, or maybe not reliant, really wants the Regain draw to resolve, I don't know if I would be convinced to play the Prosperity. Maybe if I fit a few more breakers into here, I could be convinced that the Prosperity would be worth it. Because obviously it's not like you're going to draw the Prosperity every turn anyhow, so it's not like this is just guaranteed to be a dead card. But I think there's a bit of an issue with the ratios because the matchup spread does not favor you if the Bystials aren't good non-engine and you lose the dice roll. But I think this is generally like a pretty decent approach to showing you what you can do with a Bystial version and why you might consider playing Etude. I think Etude is probably a little bit better than Branded Beast. But Beast, as I was saying, especially if you were siding after game 1 when you know you're going first, I think that the Prosperity makes a little bit more sense because you would be placing the Regained off of the Beast. And there's more chance of you seeing both the Lubellion and the Saronir because of the Prosperity. So that is my take on, or my early take on Bystial White Forest. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you have any feedback.